in fact, you can also predict what policies they're going to follow by looking at the concentration of campaign funding. In fact, there's extensive political science work on this. The next election is expected to cost $2 billion, and it'll probably be a lot more than that. So, not surprisingly, Obama, you take a look at his recent appointments, they're all coming straight from the corporate sector. You know, like his latest appointment to deal with jobs is the CEO of General Electric, who has the workforce overseas and most of the profit from overseas, but plenty of money, right at the core of the financial system and the corporate system. Those are the ones who are going to buy the next election. So Obama and the people around him are being very quiet about the Wisconsin uprisings. In fact, Obama himself has struck pretty hard blows against the unions. Remember, what's involved at this point is the public unions. The private sector unions have been almost destroyed. What's left is the public sector unions. The private sector unionization in the U.S. is below 7% of the workforce now. It's really destroyed. And the public sector unions are still alive. In the lame duck session of Congress, you know, this session after the election, before the new Congress takes over, Obama was greatly praised for his moves towards bipartisanship and the legislative achievements. This is last, December, January. What were the achievements? Well, the main achievement had to do with tax policy, a gift to the very rich, the super rich. A major tax cut for the super rich. That was very strongly opposed by the population, but Obama gave it away. Well, they're the guys that were going to buy the next election for him, antagonize them. At the same time, he announced a tax increase for federal workers. Now, they didn't call it a tax increase. They called it a pay freeze. But you think for 30 seconds, pay freeze for public sector workers is identical to a tax increase to the same thing. The numbers come out the same. So he announced a tax cut for federal workers and a tax decrease for the super rich. In the same breath, announced a further freeze for federal workers for 5 years. Again, a tax increase, which of course goes up because of population growth and inflation and so on. Well, it's all happening at the same time. The attack on teachers is particularly interesting. It's part of a very broad campaign to try to destroy the public education system. It's happening here too, by privatizing it. That way you make sure that it's going to be fine for the rich and everybody else can worry about themselves. So the capitalist society is supposed to work. So you want to get rid of this defect of the public education system. Lying behind that attack, and also the attack on pensions and Social Security and so on, is, I think, an ideological point. You have to understand the business world tends to be very class-conscious, kind of Marxist, old Marxist. They're always fighting a bitter class war, and that has to be fought on ideological grounds as well as policy grounds. There are certain beliefs that you have to drive out of people's heads because they're dangerous. One major one is solidarity. If you want to make sure that people think about only themselves, I need more iPads. I don't care what happens to disabled widows across town. That's the way you're supposed to be. And great efforts are made to try to turn people into that. Because solidarity is a dangerous notion. It means people can get together and stand up against concentrated power. What do you think of the public school system? That's based on the concept of solidarity. Like say, I don't have enough children in school anymore. But so therefore, if I was a right-thinking person, I would say, I'm not going to pay taxes. Why should I pay taxes so that the kid across the street can go to school? Okay? Or take Social Security. It means almost nothing to the care of myself. If that disabled widow across town has food to eat, that's a bad idea. You've got to knock that out of people's heads and start some child. That lies behind, I think, the attack on public education and other public services. And these are forces ideas that bring people together to create a more livable, decent, free, democratic world, which is very much counter to the interests of concentrated power. So all this stuff is going on in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's kind of like a center of it, but it's happening all over. Major struggles, counterparts right here. Not hard to think of, and in Europe and so on. Well, what about Sunni and Shia? Well, there has been a Sunni-Shia divide in the Arab world, in the Muslim world for a long time, but it was kind of muted. What really exacerbated it and turned it into a major devastating force is the U.S.-British invasion of Iraq. Take a look at what happened there. In the early days of the occupation, Sunni and Shia were living together as they had been all the time. And, they were saying, look back and read it, that we're not going to fight each other, we intermarry, friendly, and so on. By about 2005, the effect of the invasion had led to conflict. And once you get those conflicts started, they take on a life of their own. Catholic and Irish and Protestant Northern Ireland, they take on a life of their own. You killed my cousin, I'm going to kill your uncle, and that sort of thing. And pretty soon there was a major civil war in Iraq. Baghdad is kind of destroyed. The communities are ethnically cleansed, and barriers between them, and so on. One of the reasons, the main reason violence is reduced, is that people are separated from one another. So people to kill one right next to you. And that's spread all over the Arab world, Lebanon, and everywhere. So by now, there's a major Sunni-Shia conflict. However, I don't think that has much to do with what's going on now. Except in one place, two places, in Bahrain and in Saudi Arabia. Bahrain is extremely significant, and you'll notice that the West is no nonsense about democracy in Bahrain and supporting the king, the dictator. Bahrain is a Sunni dictatorship with a largely Shia population. It's right across the causeway from eastern Saudi Arabia. Eastern Saudi Arabia is largely Shiite, and it happens to be where most of the oil is. There's a kind of an accident of history and geography, which has put most of the world's oil in Shiite-dominated areas, right around the northern part of the Gulf, eastern Saudi Arabia, southern Iraq, and Iran, Shia Iran. And there's been a concern way back in Western circles that this might be some kind of alliance, which would mean that maybe some independent Shiite movement would have much of the world's oil under their control. That's totally intolerable. Bahrain also hosts the U.S. Fifth Fleet, the major military force in the region. So for lots of reasons, the West is going to do everything it can to keep things from boiling over in Bahrain and, of course, Saudi Arabia. That's what happened yesterday with the So there's a kind of there are Shiite Sunni conflicts and strong in Iraq and Lebanon and elsewhere, but except for this case, which relates really to control over oil, I don't think that's been part of the Egyptian, Tunisian, other uprisings.
Just a quick one. Mr. Chomsky, I'd like to thank you for what you've said today. I found it very, very interesting, particularly on the issue of Palestine. But I have to ask this question, considering the 9/11 perpetrators, the majority of them are from Saudi Arabia,